In this video, we are going to take a look at how to deploy a GraphQL API and a React application on Platform.sh. Our application requests a list of videos from our Deploy Friday YouTube playlist and displays a count of up and down votes. To do so, our GraphQL API aggregates two different information sources, the YouTube REST API and our MongoDB database where we store the votes. We also use GraphQL mutations to update the vote counts, and subscription to display those updates in real time. So how does this work on Platform.sh? Well, Platform.sh uses three different kinds of YAML files to configure and run your applications. Let's start by focusing on our API and open its platform.app.yaml file. This is where we declare what our application is and what it needs in order to be built and run. As you can see, our application name is API, and it uses Node.js. The variables and hook section here allow us to use a Node version that is different from the one installed by default on our container, so we can use more modern Node features such as top-level awaits and ES modules in our application code. What happens here is that at build time, we are going to fetch and install nvm to manage our Node versions. While we can declare environment variables here, this is not where you want sensitive information to be stored. For that, Platform.sh allows to set environment variables from the CLI or the project console. This is how a YouTube API key is stored for this project. The relationship property here is used to declare what services our application is going to be connected with. Finally, the weblog here is where we specify the command to start our application and some configuration, such as the usage of WebSocket. We declare the database relationship that points to a service called DB. But how does Platform.sh know about this DB service? For that, we need to declare it in another file called services.yaml. Here, we declare a DB service that is of type MongoDB and uses version 3.6, and we also allocate a little bit of disk space. Now, how do we connect our application to this service? Platform.sh offers an npm package called platform.config to make this easy. Let's look at our index.js file. We want to keep Platform.sh's footprint minimal in your application. Getting the database credentials is done by requesting the credentials from the relationship called database. We then format these credentials for Mongo client. You do not need to know the URL, the username, password, or anything else. We keep and expose this information for you. We now have an API that can run, but we still can't access it. To do so, we need to define our application entry points from the outside world. This is done in routes.yaml. This is where we can expose our applications and services. The last two routes here are the ones exposing our API. API.default is going to be our main entry point to send requests to our GraphQL API. The default here will be automatically replaced with the right URL for our current environment. The route API.default/GraphQL is our WebSocket endpoint used for subscriptions. We give specific IDs to both of these routes. This will be used in our front end to get the right URLs to configure our GraphQL client. Let's now open the Platform app YAML of our React app. We name our app front and use Node.js. npm is the default package manager. In order to use Yarn, we set the build flavor to none, so we have complete control over our build process. Hooks allow us to run different commands at different steps of our deployment. The build step is where you want to build your application. This step has access to a subset of our environment variables. Anything that is environment dependent will not be accessible here. This is to ensure reproducible and stable builds across environments. You can think of this step as a compilation step. However, some applications, like React applications, might need such information during build time. This is why we delay our application build to the deploy hook. This hook has access to the routes and relationships of our application. Since we created our application with create React app, we know that only environment variable prefixed with React app are accessible. The platform config package we use to connect to our services reads values from the environment variables. This is why we need to explicitly export them here by re-exporting them with the React app prefix. Then, we need to declare a relationship to our API and serve our index.html file to every request we get on the endpoint serving our front application. Past the build hook, everything becomes read-only. This is done for security reasons. Since we build our application in the deploy hook, we need to explicitly tell that our build and cache directories or mount points where write operation are authorized. Let's now look at how to configure our GraphQL client to connect to our API. Everything is done in our getAppAllowURIs function. If we have access to a relationship called API, then we're running in a Platform.sh environment. Using the node end variable, we determine if we are running in a development or production mode. In development mode, we can directly point to the host and port we got from the credentials function for our API. If not, then we need to get the current URL our API is accessible at in our current environment. To do that, we ask a configuration for the available routes and get the ones that have the IDs GraphQL entry points and GraphQL subscriptions, since these are the IDs that we used in our routes.yaml file. For WebSockets, Apollo client needs the protocol to be WSS, which is the reason for the replace right there. Finally, if we are not in the Platform.sh environment, we can return the default development URLs. This is the only part in our application code where we need to take the fact that we deploy on Platform.sh into account. Anything else will be regular JavaScript you already know. Now, let's run our application locally, develop a new feature and have it merged. Let's say we want to show a better date format for each video. First, let's create a new branch. This new branch is turned into a full environment. This means a complete copy of our production. This guarantees that when you're developing new features, you will have no differences between your development and production environment and will be able to access your own databases and services, so there are no conflicts with anybody else's developments. Let's take a look at our new environment. Under the environment list here, you can see that I have now date format. Let's check the application. All of the data of our production environment is here and accessible along with the services. This means that we can vote, and it will have no impact on our production environment. Let's now change the date. Let's say that what we want is a new date to local date string. For our frontend to be able to connect to the API without having to run it locally, we can open an Ssh Tunnel to our newly created environment. I made this easier by creating a shell script that can open the right tunnel and export the right variables for me. Let's source this script and then run our React application. As you can see, even though we are not running the API server locally, we're able to connect to it through our SSH tunnel. And we can see that our subscriptions still work. Also, we can see that our change worked correctly, so we are now able to commit and push that change. Our push here is triggering a new build that will be deployed, so we can test straight away our application in the real environment. Once this is done, we will get the link to the deployed application. This link can be shared with anyone. This makes it easy to send previews to product owners, QA, or stakeholders for validation without the need to get the branch merged and deployed to a single staging or test environment. It reduces the feedback loop, making your team more productive and efficient. Now that the build and the deployment are done, let's check our application. This looks fine. We can now get it merged. In this video, we have seen how to deploy a GraphQL API and a React application on Platform.sh, and how our environment cloning feature helps in developing features with confidence. If you want to know more, you can read our documentation on docs.platform.sh.